In a quiet European neighborhood, there was a woman named Karen who was known for her strong opinions and constant need to control everything around her. She lived in a small house with a neat garden, where everything had its place. But one day, her peaceful routine was interrupted by the arrival of a new neighbor. His name was Mamadou Soro, a tall, muscular man who had recently moved into a house a few doors down. Mamadou was originally from Burkina Faso, a country in West Africa, and he had a calm and reserved nature. He didn't make a lot of noise or draw attention to himself, but there was something about him that made Karen uneasy. It wasn't anything he had done. It was just that he was different. He didn't fit into her perfect, predictable world. Mamadou would often be seen outside, training in his backyard. He would do exercises like push-ups, squats, and long runs, and sometimes he would sit quietly with a book. While the other neighbors went about their daily lives without paying much attention, Karen couldn't stop watching him from her window. There was something about his discipline, the way he moved with purpose, that made her suspicious. She would often tell her friends, "He's always outside, training like a soldier. I've never seen anyone do that before." Her friends would nod, but they didn't share her concerns. They figured he was just a private person who liked to keep to himself. However, Karen was not the type to let things go easily. The more she watched Mamadou, the more she began to create stories in her mind. He's probably hiding something, she thought. Maybe he's even dangerous. Why else would he be so secretive? No one around here behaves like that. One afternoon, Karen decided she could no longer ignore her growing suspicion. She put on her coat and marched out to confront him. She approached Mamadou's house with a look of determination on her face, ready to ask him all the questions that had been swirling in her mind. Mamadou was outside, as usual, doing a series of stretches. He glanced up and smiled politely when he saw Karen approaching. "Hello," he said in a soft voice. "Hi," Karen replied, trying to sound casual, though she was anything but calm inside. "I've been seeing you around a lot, and I just wanted to ask, why are you always outside doing these exercises? And why do so many people come to visit you? It's not normal." Mamadou paused, clearly surprised by the question. He looked at her with kindness, not aggression. "I'm just keeping fit," he said. "It's part of my routine. As for the visitors, I have friends who come to talk to me from time to time. Nothing more." But Karen wasn't satisfied with his answer. She narrowed her eyes and took a step closer. "I don't know. It just feels off. You're not from here, and you're always so private. I think you're hiding something." Mamadou sighed and took a step back. "I'm not hiding anything," he said firmly. "Please, just mind your business. I don't mean any harm." But Karen wasn't ready to drop it. "I don't trust you," she muttered under her breath before storming off. As she walked back to her house, her mind raced with possibilities. "I'll have to do something about this," she thought. "I can't let someone like that just slip under the radar." Her suspicions were just beginning to grow, and she was about to take matters into her own hands. Little did she know, her actions would set off a chain of events that she would regret later. The next day, Karen couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong with her new neighbor. She spent the morning pacing around her house, growing more and more suspicious. "He's hiding something," she muttered to herself. "I just know it." By the time afternoon rolled around, Karen had made up her mind. She decided that it was time to confront Mamadou directly. No more sitting by and wondering. She needed answers. So she put on her shoes and headed out the door, determined to get to the bottom of this. Mamadou was outside again, as he often was, stretching his muscles with quiet focus. He didn't seem to notice Karen approaching, so she took a deep breath and walked up to him. "I need to talk to you," she said, her voice sharp. Mamadou looked up, his face calm. He gave her a polite nod. "Of course," he replied. "What can I do for you?" Karen didn't waste any time. "I've been watching you," she said, almost accusingly, "and I don't trust you. You're always out here, working out like you're preparing for something. You don't seem like the kind of person who fits in here." Mamadou raised an eyebrow, but didn't respond immediately. He stood up straighter, clearly sensing the tension in the air. "I'm not sure what you mean," he said gently. "I'm just exercising. It helps me stay healthy. And I don't believe there's anything strange about me being here." "Don't play dumb with me," Karen snapped. I know you're not who you say you are. What's your real reason for being here? Who are you really working for? I've seen people come and go from your house. Why are they all so secretive?" Mamadou's expression changed slightly. He looked at her with a calmness that seemed almost too peaceful for the situation. "I assure you, there is nothing wrong with my actions. I've been asked to stay here for a while, and I'm simply doing my job. I don't want any trouble." But Karen wasn't satisfied. She took a step forward, her face full of suspicion. "Your job? What kind of job? You can't just be some regular person. You don't look like everyone else around here. I know you're hiding something." Mamadou took a deep breath, his patience wearing thin, but his voice still measured. "I told you before, I'm not hiding anything. I'm here on leave. I'm just enjoying some quiet time." Karen's eyes narrowed as she looked at him, still unconvinced. "Quiet time? Or is there something more going on? Why don't you just tell me the truth? Why don't you tell me exactly what you're doing here?" For a moment, Mamadou stayed silent, his face unreadable. Then, with a slight shrug, he replied, "I don't think you'll believe me, but I can't say more. I'm not a criminal, and I don't mean anyone harm." Karen felt the heat of anger rising in her chest. She couldn't stand the idea that someone was out there, living among them, and she couldn't figure out their secret. Her frustration bubbled over, and she blurted out, "I don't care about your quiet time. You're hiding something, and I'm going to make sure the authorities know about it." Mamadou didn't seem surprised. He just nodded slowly, as if he had expected her reaction. "If that's what you want to do, then do it," he said quietly, turning away from her. "But know this, I have done nothing wrong." Karen stood there, fuming, as she watched him walk back into his house. The conversation had gone exactly as she had feared, and now she was more certain than ever that Mamadou was hiding something. She marched back to her house, already planning her next step. This wasn't over. She would make sure the authorities knew about her suspicions. As she reached her front door, her mind raced. "This is the right thing to do," she thought. "He can't be trusted. I'll expose him for what he really is." Little did she know, she was about to start a chain of events that would turn her life upside down. The following afternoon, Karen sat at her kitchen table, her hands shaking with excitement. She couldn't believe how easy it had been to spot Mamadou's secret. He was hiding something, she was sure of it, and now it was time to act. She took a deep breath, grabbed her phone, and dialed the local police. "Hello, this is Karen Davis. I need to report something suspicious," she said, trying to sound calm, but her voice quivered with urgency. "There's a man living in my neighborhood, and he's acting strangely. I'm certain he's hiding something dangerous." The voice on the other end of the line was polite, but professional. "Can you tell me more about what's happening, ma'am?" the officer asked. "Yes," Karen replied quickly. "He's always out there, working out, and he's really secretive. People come and go from his house, but no one ever talks about him. I'm telling you, he's up to no good. I think he's some kind of terrorist or militia leader. We can't just let someone like that live here." The officer paused for a moment. "We'll send someone to investigate, ma'am. Please stay inside, and don't approach the individual. We'll handle it from here." Karen hung up the phone, feeling a wave of relief wash over her. She had done the right thing. Now Mamadou's dangerous secret would be exposed, and everyone would see him for what he really was. She sat down and waited. Her mind raced as she imagined the police arriving at Mamadou's house, knocking on his door, and questioning him. She wondered if he would try to lie his way out of it. No matter what happened, she was sure this was the end for him. He couldn't hide anymore. Later that day, Karen watched from her window as several police cars pulled up to Mamadou's house. She smiled to herself, knowing that soon the truth would come out. The officers knocked on Mamadou's door, and he answered without hesitation. There was no sign of panic on his face, just calmness. Karen's smile faded as she saw the police talking with Mamadou. He didn't seem worried. In fact, he was even smiling as they spoke. Soon, the officers began to leave, shaking their heads. Mamadou was still standing in his yard, watching them drive away. Confused, Karen picked up her phone and called the police station again. "I don't understand," she said. "Why did they leave? Didn't they find anything suspicious?" The officer on the other end of the line was now less patient. "Ma'am, we investigated the situation thoroughly. The man you reported is not involved in anything illegal. He's a private citizen here on leave. We found no evidence of any wrongdoing. Please refrain from making accusations without cause in the future." Karen's heart dropped. But he's a danger. You have to do something." "Ma'am, we've handled the situation. Please do not make any further calls about this matter," the officer said, his tone final. Karen hung up the phone, stunned. She couldn't believe it. How could the police have cleared him so quickly? There had to be a mistake. She stared out the window at Mamadou, who was now back to his usual routine, stretching and running. He was still there, still calm, and still a mystery. It didn't make sense. Karen's mind was racing, but deep down, she began to realize that something wasn't right. Maybe she had jumped to conclusions too quickly. Maybe Mamadou wasn't who she thought he was. But the more she thought about it, the more frustrated she became. She couldn't just let it go. She had to know the truth, no matter what. Little did she know, the story was far from over. Her actions were about to set off a chain of events that would not only change her life, but the lives of those around her in ways she could never have imagined. Karen couldn't believe what had just happened. The police had left Mamadou's house without taking any action, and that only made her more determined to prove she was right. But now, as she watched him continue his quiet life, she began to wonder if she had made a huge mistake. Her suspicions grew louder in her mind, but so did the nagging doubt that maybe she had been wrong all along. It didn't take long for the situation to get worse. By the next morning, Karen woke up to find that her neighbors were talking about the incident. Some were curious about her report to the police, and others were uncomfortable. A few had even started whispering behind her back. It felt like the whole neighborhood was turning on her, and to make matters worse, her phone started buzzing with messages from friends and family, all asking about the situation. One message from a local journalist stood out. It read, "We've heard about your call to the police about your neighbor. Can we get your side of the story?" Karen felt a mix of emotions. Part of her wanted to ignore it, but another part felt the pressure of defending her actions. She replied, agreeing to meet the journalist. She was sure she could explain everything and make people understand why she had done what she did. After all, she was just looking out for her community. When the journalist arrived at her home, Karen tried to sound confident. She had rehearsed her story in her head, ready to explain why Mamadou was a threat. The journalist set up his camera and asked her to tell him everything that had happened. "I knew something wasn't right," Karen began, her voice steady. "He's always outside, always training. No one knows who he is. He's not like anyone else around here, and people were visiting him in secret. I just had to report it. I did what any responsible person would do." The journalist nodded, making notes, but Karen couldn't help feeling like something wasn't quite right. As she spoke, she realized that her words sounded harsher than she had intended. She tried to make it clear that she was only trying to protect everyone, but deep down, she knew she had gone too far. As the interview went on, Karen began to feel a sense of unease. The journalist was asking more questions than she had expected. "How sure are you that he's dangerous?" he asked. "I'm positive," Karen responded. "He's hiding something. He's not like the rest of us. I just know it." The journalist didn't press any further, but the uncomfortable feeling stayed with Karen. After the interview, he left, promising to share the story soon. Karen tried to shake off her doubts, but they lingered. Later that evening, the story went live. The journalist had written about her call to the police, but what he had included were the parts of her story that made her seem more paranoid than protective. Phrases like a suspicious neighbor, unjustified accusations, and acting out of fear filled the article. Suddenly, Karen was the one being questioned by everyone. People from the neighborhood called, texted, and even confronted her in person, wondering why she had made such a big deal out of nothing. Many of them had heard Mamadou's side of the story, and it painted a much different picture. Now, Karen felt embarrassed. She had thought she was helping her community, but instead, she had become the center of attention for all the wrong reasons. Her neighbors, who once avoided her because of her harsh opinions, now had even more reason to stay away. She started receiving messages online calling her paranoid and racist, and the pressure was unbearable. Mamadou, meanwhile, had not said a word to anyone. He simply continued his peaceful life, his routine unaffected by the chaos surrounding him. But Karen couldn't ignore the feeling that the situation was slipping out of her control. She had made a mistake, and she wasn't sure how to fix it. Her actions had led her down a path she never expected, and now she had to figure out how to handle the consequences. One thing was certain: the story was far from over. The morning after the story about Karen broke, her phone buzzed nonstop with notifications. Friends, neighbors, and even strangers from the internet were commenting on the article. Some were angry at her, others were sympathetic, but many were simply confused. It was clear that she had become the talk of the town. But the most unexpected message came later that day. A local news outlet had received a statement from a government official in Burkina Faso. It was brief, but the tone was strong. "We are aware of the incident involving Captain Mamadou Soro. We do not tolerate disrespect toward our soldiers or their families. The president of Burkina Faso, Ibrahim Traoré, is personally looking into the matter." Karen stared at the message, unable to fully understand what it meant. Who was this Captain Mamadou Soro? And why would the president of an entire country be involved in something that had started with her suspicions? The phone call came an hour later. It was an international number, and Karen picked up hesitantly. "Hello. Hello, this is President Ibrahim Traoré of Burkina Faso," came a deep, calm voice from the other end. Karen's heart skipped a beat. She had never imagined she'd be speaking to someone so important. Wait, President Traoré," she stammered, completely caught off guard. Is this real?" "Yes, it is real," the president replied, his voice still calm but carrying an authority that made Karen feel small. "I'm calling about the situation involving Captain Mamadou Soro, your neighbor. It seems there's been some misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Karen repeated, her voice shaking. But he's dangerous. He's been hiding something. He's not like everyone else. I saw him doing strange things." The president didn't raise his voice. "I understand that you may have concerns. Captain Soro is not a criminal. He's a soldier who served in many dangerous places. He's currently on leave, and he deserves the respect of the people around him. His presence in your neighborhood is not a threat, but a sign of peace." Karen felt a cold shiver run down her spine. But the police said they couldn't find anything. They didn't even do anything about it. Why didn't they do more? "The police have done what they needed to do," the president said firmly. "The truth is, Captain Soro is a protector, a hero to our country, and it's important to respect him, not make baseless accusations. I am calling to let you know that your actions have consequences, and we are taking this very seriously." Karen's thoughts were racing. She had never expected this kind of response. It felt like the world had shifted under her feet. I didn't mean to cause any trouble. I just thought he was hiding something." "You must understand that we all have a duty to judge others fairly," President Traoré continued, his tone softer now. "You cannot jump to conclusions based on fear or suspicion. This has gone too far, and I am asking you to reconsider your actions. I want you to think about the impact of what you've done, not just to Captain Soro, but to yourself and your community." There was a long pause. Karen didn't know what to say. She felt a heavy weight in her chest, guilt mixing with confusion. I didn't know. I thought I was just protecting everyone. But now, it feels like I'd done the wrong thing." "Sometimes we make mistakes," President Traoré said, "but it's important to learn from them. I hope this experience will teach you about the harm that can come from false accusations. I ask that you apologize to Captain Soro and allow him to continue his time here without further interference." The president paused before adding, "And remember, when you are quick to judge, you risk damaging something much larger than you realize." The call ended, and Karen sat there, stunned. She could hardly believe what had just happened. She had been scolded by a president, an entire nation's leader, and told to apologize to the very man she had accused. The weight of her actions felt overwhelming. Now, Karen had to decide what to do next. Should she apologize publicly and admit her mistake? Could she face her neighbors and explain herself? The pressure was immense, but one thing was clear: she had underestimated the consequences of her actions, and now she had to find a way to make things right. The story was far from over, and Karen was about to find out just how much she had underestimated the situation. The days after the phone call from President Traoré felt like a whirlwind for Karen. Her mind kept replaying the conversation, his calm but firm voice reminding her of the damage she had caused. She spent the next few days in a haze, avoiding her neighbors, and feeling the weight of guilt pressed down on her shoulders. The once peaceful community around her now felt distant, as though she didn't belong anymore. Karen knew she had to make things right, but how? The thought of apologizing to Mamadou felt almost impossible. How could she face him after everything she had said about him? The fear of being judged by him and everyone else was overwhelming. Still, she knew she had no choice. She had to take responsibility for her actions. One evening, Karen finally gathered enough courage to walk over to Mamadou's house. She stood in front of his door for several minutes, her heart racing in her chest. She wasn't sure what she would say, but she knew she couldn't put it off any longer. Taking a deep breath, she knocked. It didn't take long before Mamadou answered. He looked at her with a calm, almost neutral expression, as if he had been expecting her. His eyes met hers, and for a moment there was an uncomfortable silence between them. Karen opened her mouth, but the words didn't come out at first. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she spoke. "Mamadou, I made a terrible mistake," she stammered. "I accused you of things you didn't deserve. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." Mamadou didn't say anything immediately. He simply nodded, his expression still unreadable. Karen felt the weight of his silence, but she pushed on. "I thought you were hiding something, but I didn't take the time to really understand who you are. I didn't ask the right questions, and I let my fears control my actions," she continued, her voice trembling. "I hurt you, and I hurt myself. I'm truly sorry." Mamadou's face softened, but he didn't seem angry or upset. Instead, he spoke with quiet understanding. "I appreciate your apology, Karen, but you must also understand that your actions caused harm. It's not just about me, but about the trust in the community. Fear and suspicion can do more damage than any truth." Karen nodded, feeling a wave of shame wash over her. She had never thought about it that way. Her fear had spread, and it had affected everyone, not just her and Mamadou. "I know," she said quietly. "I didn't realize how much damage my actions could cause, but I'm going to make it right. I'll do whatever it takes." Mamadou gave her a small, understanding smile. "I believe you. But remember, this is a lesson for everyone. We must not judge others based on our assumptions. Sometimes, things aren't as they seem." The conversation left Karen feeling both relieved and anxious. She had apologized, and Mamadou had accepted it, but there was still much more to do. The neighborhood had already heard the rumors, and she knew they would need to see her actions match her words. The next day, Karen stood at the front of her house, preparing to face the people she had once felt so connected to. She took a deep breath, gathering the courage to speak. She needed to tell them the truth, to let them know she had made a mistake. One by one, her neighbors began to gather, and Karen stepped forward, her voice steady, but filled with humility. "I owe you all an apology," she began. "I made a huge mistake in my judgment of Mamadou Soro. I wrongly accused him of being a danger to our community, and that was wrong. I let fear and suspicion cloud my thinking, and I hurt all of you in the process." The neighbors listened in silence as Karen continued. "I'd spoken to Mamadou, and I understand now that he is not a threat. I ask for your forgiveness, and I promise to be more thoughtful and understanding in the future." The silence that followed was thick, but slowly, one by one, her neighbors began to nod, some offering quiet words of support. Karen felt a sense of relief, but she knew the road to rebuilding trust would be long. As the day came to a close, Karen stood on her porch, looking at the peaceful neighborhood around her. She had made a mistake, but she was determined to fix it. She had learned a valuable lesson about fear, trust, and the consequences of her actions. The story of her judgment was far from over, but she was beginning to see the path forward. It would take time, but she was ready to face the truth and rebuild the community she had almost torn apart. Days passed after Karen's apology, and things in the neighborhood began to settle down. The tension that had once filled the air started to fade, but Karen knew she still had a lot to prove. People were watching her, waiting to see if she would follow through on her promises to be more open-minded and considerate. She knew she had to work hard to rebuild the trust she had lost. One morning, as Karen was walking to the mailbox, she saw Mamadou outside his house, stretching before his usual run. For the first time in days, she felt like she could approach him without the fear that had once clouded her judgment. She walked over, trying to act normal, but her heart was still racing. "Good morning, Mamadou," she said, her voice steady but warm. Mamadou looked up and smiled, a genuine expression that made Karen feel a little more at ease. "Good morning, Karen. How are you?" "I'm doing better," she replied. "I wanted to thank you again for being so understanding the other day. I know I hurt you, and I'll do my best to make sure it never happens again." "You don't have to thank me," Mamadou said, shaking his head. "It's not about what's happened in the past. It's about moving forward, about learning from our mistakes." His words were simple, but they struck Karen deeply. She had been so focused on her own guilt that she hadn't stopped to think about the bigger picture. Mamadou wasn't holding her mistake over her head. He was offering a chance to grow, to change, and that was something she had never expected from him. "I appreciate that," Karen said quietly. "I've learned a lot. I've been thinking a lot about how easily we judge people, how quickly fear can take over. I've realized that we need to get to know others before jumping to conclusions." Mamadou nodded, his eyes warm with understanding. "Exactly. It's easy to fear what we don't understand, but if we open ourselves to learning, we find that people are more than what we assume. We are all different, but we share the same desire for peace." As Karen listened to him, she realized that Mamadou wasn't just talking about himself. He was speaking to something much bigger. He was talking about how people in the neighborhood could work together, how they could overcome their differences and build something better. The more she thought about it, the more Karen understood how much she had underestimated him. The conversation ended with a simple handshake. Mamadou didn't ask for anything more, and Karen didn't offer any excuses. Instead, they simply stood there for a moment, understanding that words didn't always need to be said. Sometimes, actions spoke louder. The following weeks were filled with small changes. Karen made a conscious effort to be more aware of her own thoughts and actions. She started talking to her neighbors more, trying to understand their perspectives and listen without judgment. She began to notice how often fear shaped her thoughts, and she worked hard to challenge those assumptions. Soon, other neighbors began to approach Mamadou, just as Karen had. At first, it was small talk, comments about the weather or the neighborhood. But gradually, the conversations became more meaningful. Mamadou shared stories of his time as a soldier, not as a way to boast, but to help others understand his journey. He didn't ask for anyone's sympathy, but instead, he offered his experiences as a way to connect. Through these conversations, Karen began to see Mamadou in a new light. He wasn't the mysterious, dangerous figure she had once imagined. He was a man who had lived through hardships, someone who valued peace and understanding. And in turn, Karen realized that she had underestimated the strength of kindness, the power of listening, and the importance of community. By the end of the month, the neighborhood had started to change. The walls of suspicion that Karen had helped build were slowly coming down, replaced by a deeper understanding between everyone. Mamadou wasn't just a neighbor anymore. He had become part of the fabric of the community. Karen had learned her lesson, and though it hadn't been easy, she felt grateful for the experience. It had been a hard journey, but one that had taught her the value of empathy, patience, and the importance of seeing people for who they truly were. As she sat on her porch one evening, watching the sunset, Karen smiled. She had made mistakes, but now she felt like she was finally on the right path. The story had changed, and so had she. Life in the neighborhood had started to feel different in the weeks following Karen's apology. The tension that had once filled the air was gradually replaced with a new sense of togetherness. It wasn't just that people were more open-minded or forgiving. It was that the community had learned something valuable from the entire situation. Karen had learned to be more understanding, and Mamadou had shown the others that it was possible to move past misunderstandings with grace. One Saturday afternoon, as the sun shone brightly over the quiet street, Karen sat on her porch, reflecting on the changes. She noticed how people seemed to be coming together more than ever before. The neighborhood kids were playing together, laughing and sharing toys. The adults were standing in groups, chatting and exchanging recipes, plans, and even stories about their own experiences. Karen had been a part of this neighborhood for years, but she had never seen it like this. There was a new sense of connection, a deeper respect for one another, and Karen realized that all of this had started with her mistake, a mistake that had brought people closer in unexpected ways. The real turning point had come when Mamadou decided to host a community gathering. He had invited everyone, even those who had once doubted him or stayed away. The idea was simple: a barbecue in his backyard where everyone could come together, share food, and talk. At first, Karen wasn't sure how it would go. She wasn't sure if the neighbors would feel comfortable or if they would just go through the motions. But when she arrived at Mamadou's house, she was surprised by how welcoming the atmosphere felt. The backyard was filled with the smell of grilled food, and tables were set up with all kinds of delicious dishes. Mamadou had even invited a few local musicians to play some soft music in the background. People were laughing, talking, and even dancing in small groups. It felt like a celebration of everything they had gone through together, a moment of healing and connection. Karen saw many of her neighbors, some of whom she hadn't spoken to in years, talking to Mamadou as if they had known him all their lives. It was clear that the walls between them had come down. People were sharing their stories, laughing about misunderstandings, and talking about how they could all be better neighbors moving forward. Mamadou wasn't just a guest at this gathering. He was a symbol of how things had changed. People had learned to embrace one another's differences, and they were stronger because of it. As Karen walked around, she found herself talking to people she had once avoided. She spoke with Mrs. Wilson, who had always kept to herself, and with Mr. Johnson, the retired teacher who usually preferred to stay quiet. Both of them told her how they had always admired Mamadou for his quiet strength, and how they had never understood why people had been so quick to judge him. They, too, had learned from the situation, and they were grateful for the opportunity to get to know him better. Later in the evening, Mamadou stood up to thank everyone for coming. His voice was calm, but there was a warmth in it that made everyone listen carefully. "Thank you all for being here today," Mamadou said. "It means a lot to me that we can come together like this. We've all learned something from the past, and now we can move forward as a community, stronger and more united. Let's remember that we are all different, but we are all part of the same neighborhood, and that makes us stronger." As he spoke, Karen couldn't help but feel a sense of pride. Mamadou had shown her that there was always room for change, for forgiveness, and for growth. The community was no longer divided by fear or suspicion. Instead, it was a place where people could share their lives with one another, no matter their background or past mistakes. As the night ended and people began to leave, Karen walked up to Mamadou and gave him a smile. "Thank you," she said simply. Mamadou smiled back, his eyes full of understanding. "Thank you, Karen. We all played a part in this. Now, let's keep moving forward together." As she walked home that night, Karen felt a sense of peace that she hadn't felt in a long time. She had learned a difficult lesson, but it had been worth it. Her community was stronger than ever, and she was a part of that change. It wasn't just about forgiving others, it was about understanding and growing together. And for the first time, Karen truly felt like she belonged.